Okay, Norm, what is on the agenda today?
Well, we've done a lot already, but there's a lot more to go. We're going to be doing the creature. We're going to see the creature for the first time.
And this is not a creature that they sculpted from scratch. They kind of built this out of parts and pieces in the incredible library of textures and horns and stuff that they have here, right?
Yeah, it would be impossible for them to design, fabricate a whole creature in a week's time.
No, impossible.
So we're very lucky that they made a creature for an existing event from a video game, Path of Exile, which they had taken over to a festival in China, and they've let us use this creature for the film.
I can't wait to see it close up. This kind of work is really beautiful. It's foam latex. Again, that's all I know about it, so I'm really looking forward to getting to see it. What else are we uncovering today?
Yes, we're going to check in on some prosthetics that you're making, and you'll be wet molding some leather, so building some costume work.
Oh, nice. For the soldier.
The soldier,
okay,
exactly.
Awesome. I have played around with wet molding. The soles of my Totoro feet are wet molded, but it was a really difficult thing to do, so I'm looking forward to learning how to do it better.
It's skins for all your metal skin for your armor, you got the leather skin for a soldier, and then a foam latex skin for a creature, and they're all going to do battle.
Okay, let's get started.
Let's get started.
And it's still nice and warm. I like to have them quite warm.
Oh yeah,
sort of
nice.
just makes it so much easier to open the foam.
Feels great.
Yeah, it's nicely baked. Bit stinky.
Feels like a perfect consistency. So now these two things are effectively glued together by the latex.
Yep.
How do we? How do we?
It's the mold's released, but yeah, there's a certain amount of just adhesion just through what's happened with the latex.
Are you just using cornstarch there?
This is just talcum powder,
oh, okay.
And I just put a little bit around, and a little bit of it falls in as you sort of, because we'll use these blocks to open it, because the edge is very, very delicate, and if the foam will be a little wet, and wet foam loves to stick to itself.
It will be a little wet?
Yeah, because normally if an ultracal mold, like the negative's an ultracal and it absorbs moisture, so you get a really nice dry cast, but because the positive's actually epoxy, it can't absorb any moisture, so the inside of the prosthetic will be wet.
Interesting. Okay.
If you're taking prosthetics out of two-part epoxy molds where both the negative and the positive are epoxy, then the foam comes out very, very wet. And then you have to be very careful. Because foam it's weak when it's wet, and it also just loves to stick to itself.
Oh, so if it's weak, then when it's wet, does that make it a problem in the rain?
Not once you sort of once you sort of
you seal it after,
yeah, once you're on set and you've painted, it's not so bad. I mean, it's very absorbent, so if it gets wet enough, yeah, it gets heavy. Right, so then all I do is these are just little blocks, and they just allow it to
give us a leverage point, like a gear puller.
Pulls up evenly, rather than, you can get in there with a screwdriver and yank it out, but it tends to.
Oh, so that's what that thing is for. It's not just a handle.
Yep. We put these on pretty much all of our epoxy molds, and it's sort of, if you're making a quick ultracal mold, you might just put one handle in the middle,
right? And
that'll do the job as well. But these molds, this positive was set up to be run a lot with doing orcs. With our silicon stuff, when we're doing lots of runs, we actually embed like a T-nut, is what we call them, but it's we embed a nut in there, and then you just have a threaded rod going through here, and it's just much easier.
Slowly twink.
Do up a wing nut, and it just pops it open.
We call them T-nuts too.
Oh, cool. I've heard them referred to different things.
Really?
Like, I don't know.
They're one of my favorite mechanical fasteners.
They are awesome, eh? Yeah,
I hate glue. Glue is the worst solution to any given problem as far as I'm concerned, unless it's the only solution.
Unless it's the only solution. Right, well, that was pretty much it. It just,
oh wow, look at that, it just popped right out.
It just evenly broke the surface tension.
Fascinating.
If you grab a screwdriver, you can, but if you're popping it, you're leveraging the mold.
Right, and that's you're going to chip the edges and stuff.
Yeah.
So all of this is systems geared towards the long life of the molds.
And then that just comes up out of there. That's as positive. Because this mold has the negative has a lot of undercuts, the foam has stayed in there, which is great. So we can sort of see, well, there's our piece.
Oh, okay. So then we'll go and pull
we
this
just
out,
carefully
and
go and
this
remove it.
line here describes the edge of our mask,
That's
right?
the blending edge, yeah.
So if we pull, it's gonna.
Yeah, these are the, and as you can see here, it's actually so fine that it's fallen away, and that's what we expect to see. If you've got a really, really good mold, we call this the flashing. If you've got a really good mold and a good cast, you can't keep the two together.
Right. Yeah. Because it's that zero cleanup goal of mold making.
Yep, perfect mold, perfect blending edge.
I may have never garnered the gene for 100% good mold making, but I spent a lot of time in the mold room talking to the. I'm fascinated by the art of it. I mean, a beautifully jeweler's cup mold is something I find inspiring. I love how it wrinkles like skin. I mean, that's what its reason for existing is.
Exactly, yeah. I mean, if it was a translucent material with that weight and that kind of movement, it would be perfect.
Oh, there's no such thing?
No such thing yet.
Really?
I mean, the silicons are amazing, and
but not
you know,
this light.
we go to all sorts of length to soften them up, but it's always heavy.
There he is. Look at that.
Stinky wet face.
He's beautiful. Thank you. You're welcome. I see that you've actually given the actor the ability to breathe through the nose of the mask. That's amazing. When this applies to the actor, there's all of this surface area of his face. Is it glued across the whole surface area of his face?
Yep.
Wow.
Particularly if if something's for film, then we glue it right down. If it's more of a quick thing like a makeup test, or it's just for a few photos, then we might only lightly put it on.
Or like a lighting test, or
right. Yeah. We'll just glue key areas. But for film or for use, we glue it right on. Whole thing.
So, wow. There we go. Oh,
Scary monster.
Yep. Oh, look at this.
Yeah, so I mean, this is your arm cast cleaned up a little bit. We've put a key around the top just to keep it all secure. And because we've dried the plaster out now, it's quite hard. If we had to run it yesterday straight away when the plaster's a little soft, it'll deform when we try and open it. So we like to get them nice and dry. Right. We'll run this today.
And then you put these...
I just put a strip, we just put a strip of plaster bandage around it, and it just makes it nice and secure.
And then you'll cut
and
that for
them. Okay. And then you just leave them on, and then the next time you run it, you just put a bit more on, and it just makes it that much stronger again.
So I've got the armor and gambeson that go on this arm. Let me go grab them, and I'll bring them right back. Here is the armor, and here is the gambeson.
It's really light.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? Okay, so this is the gambeson I'll be wearing.
Yep.
Here's my arm as it currently is. So what we're trying to get here is the monster knocks my arm off, or cuts off part of my arm, and then we see this bloody stump. So I think that if we do it up here, we're looking down. We want to see this. So I think it's our forearm that we're talking about.
I think so too. Yeah, that'll be most effective.
We'll have to work out with the fake choreographers exactly how he does it. But we yank off here, which means it's literally just these two.
Take those rivets out.
These two rivets. And we pull off that forearm. I can repair it easily enough later.
And it's good for us because it's nice and light. This is really nice and light, so it's we'll be able to mount the foam arm quite easily to a rig.
So then the question is, how do where do I put my arm, right?
Yeah, exactly. We've got your arm behind your back, so it's dressing this. But this looks like this will be on all of this will be on your arm tucked.
Right.
And then this piece here, we'll have to figure out how we're going to mount that in such a way that, because obviously your fake forearm will be coming out here somewhere.
Right. So the problem is I can't, like if my arm's back, well, does that work? Can you, if that's just locked there, does that actually look okay?
It's actually not too bad.
I can't quite see it, but this feels like it, because this will sit on the armor, no problem. Right, like this buckles up here, so this will stay.
I mean, the other thing we might be able to do if we do have complexity with it is that if we have all of this on you, your arm tucked around here, and we have this part as a piece that's going to separate as well.
Oh, I see.
I mean, we can still have our break happening here, but it's almost as if when he yanks the arm off or he cuts the arm off, this piece of the armor came as well.
Right.
And whether or not that stays with the stump or not is not necessarily, doesn't necessarily need to stay with the severed arm, it could just fall away separately.
So the piece of armor that goes away is still up to here.
Yep.
Is what you're saying.
So that way we can have all of these components still on your arm. Tuck your arm behind your back, and when we actually rig it on the day off this point, we can have all this in situ.
Right.
But it will fall away.
So that my arm's going through this part here.
Yep. Through
this
that
top
part.
shoulder part. Yep. But we've removed
all of this, yeah, and we just dress that onto the fake arm, and we can either have this still attached to the fake arm, or we can just have that piece of the arm, although obviously that involves drilling out more rivets, but
still problem.
We can have that bit actually fall away as well. If it's just another layer of things getting ripped apart.
Let's totally do that. So what you're saying is my arm goes behind my back after it comes out through this.
Yes, yeah. Because it looks like when it's sitting there, that because of where that's sitting, we should be able to, it'll be just a matter of, well, we will have to turn it slightly, because obviously we're trying to look like we're like this,
right? But
we're actually doing that. We're actually turning your bicep side on.
Can I see your arm with that? Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah. So it kind of helps us if my arm's actually coming out through that.
Through there, yeah, and then and if need be, we just turn it slightly to make it look more natural, that your arm is in theory still pointing forward.
Certainly, the audience isn't going to be looking at how the that's not what their eye is going to go to.
No. It's often more about what you don't see. Some of the best gags like these, you don't actually see a heck of a lot.
Yeah,
it's quite surprising what you don't see. It's just a.
Okay, so your next steps, you're pouring this in silicone, yes?
What we'll do initially is we're just going to pour one in a soft self-skinning foam just to get an arm out of there, and we can have a look at it.
Okay.
And that'll give us a tool to plan with.
Great.
So we can actually go, yeah, let's cut it here, and we can put it in there and get it all sussed that way.
I can't wait to see the first casting out of this. Yeah. Darren, hello.
Hi there.
We're going to be wet molding some leather over this. You want to walk me through this process?
That's right, Adam. Okay. Today we're just going to give you a quick tutorial on how to wet mold vegetable tanned leather into a chest plate sort of shape. We've got a former here which is sort of in the style of a Roman muscle cuirass, just because that will give us a nice sort of, it's got a lot of features on it, so we can actually see the molding in process.
And this is this is bead foam?
That's right, this is what we call it polystyrene. We had that milled out and backformed a polypropylene sheet over it just to give you a good work surface.
And this will not stick to anything?
Yeah, that's great. And obviously an example, if you want to do this sort of stuff at home, you could use a shop type mannequin if you can find your own former or make your own. But you do need a sort of firm base to work the leather over.
Is it important that it's vegetable tan leather, not chrome tan leather?
Yeah, good point. It is. There are two sort of main groups of leather supply you can buy. Vegetable tanned leather, which is often called craft leather, is usually undyed, but the properties of that type of leather are that it accepts water, and therefore you can manipulate it and form it and emboss it, whereas the other type of leather, chrome tanned leather, is more designed for garments and bags and utility stuff, where it repels water, it won't take impressions, just for the fact that it wants a sort of long life as a product, rather than a craft leather which you can manipulate.
I did not realize that.
Yes.
Okay, and this will be the armor for the soldier in our film.
That's correct. Yep.
Okay. Where do we begin?
Okay, so basically we have the basic form. The first thing you want to do is make a very simple paper pattern.
Yep.
So just merely by laying that over your piece, you can trace around it, leave a little bit of extra.
All the way around?
All the way around. When you do immerse the leather in water, it may shrink a little, but it also gives you that extra sort of place to pull, and once you get it done, then you can trim it back at the end.
Right. So
this is about a 10 ounce or 4mm thick vegetable tanned leather. The great thing about leather is it has no real true grain.
Right.
You can get different effects from using different parts of the hide. Some parts manipulate and sort of scrunch up better and stretch more than other parts. But basically it's just something you need to experiment with. Just a tip, if you are marking onto your leather, probably want to mark on the back side.
Oh.
And that way,
because if this is going to be the hero side.
But that's if you muck it up and you mark it wrong, you haven't ruined the front.
Right, right.
Obviously you want to check the front for blemishes or anything, but always good to mark on the back and cut from behind.
Here's one we cut out earlier.
Absolutely.
Okay, now this is really stiff. It's got a lot of like dimensional hardness to it. So it's amazing to me that the water softens this up enough to mold it.
Yeah, that's correct. And obviously when it comes from the factory, it's been pressed through big rollers to get the uniform thickness and everything. But once you immerse it in the water, it actually starts to loosen up and give you some of those characteristics that were sort of taken out during the tanning process.
How long does it immerse in water?
That's kind of personal preference. There's a lot of people have a lot of different techniques. Some people like to immerse it until the bubbles sort of stop rising. I prefer just to do it slightly quicker. You don't want to over-wet the leather. If you over-wet it, it sort of restricts the amount of sort of shaping you can do. So it's almost too elastic, and it will just relax out. It won't like keep the shape.
Okay.
So it's a sweet spot between too wet and too dry. But again, with experiment, you'll sort of learn to pick sort of, and again, every piece of leather will react differently. Different thickness may need a little longer. If it's very thin, you could even get away with just spritzing the surface.
So given that, if you're doing a hero costume, you'll probably do a couple of tests just to make sure that the leather you're using will be workable.
And just through experience, you'll sort of learn what sort of time you need to soak it for.
All right. Is this soaking the next step?
That's correct. Yep.
All right. And is the water warm?
It is warm water. Again, there's preferences as to the temperature of the water. This is just hot tap water.
Push it in there?
Yeah, sure. Yep.
All right.
Just all submerged under.
Oh, it softens up very quickly.
That's about it for me. So
really?
Yep. That's as long as I'd like to keep it. And you can see that it's much more flexible already. Something at this stage, just a point to make, Adam, actually we're not going to be hardening this leather armor.
Okay.
That's another process sort of on top of the wet forming, where you may introduce baking the leather or introducing liquid wax, which is another technique to sort of actually sort of armorize the leather. And
actually make it almost like SCA approved.
That's correct,
right,
yep.
okay.
Yep. But that's a whole other sort of
this is we're doing this as an aesthetic
That's correct,
exercise.
Yep. Having it got just quickly dunked in the water, what I do now is sort of just turn it back on itself and sort of work it against itself, and you start to get these sort of natural lines coming back into the leather. So this actually softens it up for the forming process as well. So we're basically just manipulating the leather to soften it up and make it easier to work with. But it also does give you these beautiful natural sort of lines that were lost during the tanning process.
Oh, nifty.
When it came
show
through.
Up as you do this.
So these are the natural sort of aspects of the hide itself, and you can actually see a few little scars and scuffs in that there, which will come through later on in the process. So basically just turning it back on itself, manipulating it, screwing it up. Do you want to give that a go? Just give it a scrunch up. Just try and manipulate, soften it all up.
My hands are dirty.
That's fine. It all adds to the effect.
Are they that dirty?
That's fine. There's some aging right there.
Okay, yeah, exactly.
Cool. So now you can see that we're starting to get some of those sort of natural elements coming in, and they will actually highlight later on when we get to the dyeing stage and the aging process, where we sort of pick out those natural sort of highlights of the hide. If you want like some extra aging on the leather, this is a good time to sort of introduce any sort of textures or anything. You could use a texture stamp or.
That's the second largest texture pad I've ever seen.
This is our pet rock.
That's amazing.
And we use this to sort of introduce sort of aging effects and just some sort of general wear and tear. You have to be careful not to be sort of too art directed about it. You want it to look natural. You can overemphasize it a little bit at this stage, because during the process of sort of forming it, it will sort of soften out a bit, so you can exaggerate it a little.
Aragorn's belt has this texture in it.
Yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah, that's right. A lot of stuff from the Lord of the Rings has this texture. Yeah.
I recognized it. That's so funny.
So you just want to work your way around slowly, get a little bit of texture into the whole piece.
Wow.
And again, once you get to the final stage of dyeing and aging it, these things do pop out again, so it's sort of worth investing. in this extra texture. Do you want to try some of that?
Oh yeah,
I'm done.
absolutely. All right.
Great, thanks Adam, looking good. Okay, so at this stage, we can already see here, this is starting to lighten up again.
Yep.
Now I was talking about the difference between being too wet and too dry. This is almost a good example of being too wet and too dry. It's kind of, we've got both extremes there.
Okay.
So I'm going to give it just a quick dunk, and then we'll move on to the forming
Okay.
of the piece itself. Okay, so basically we're just going to drape this over here. And just give it it kind of does need to rest to absorb. You can see this sort of moisture going in. But we'll just give that a second to sort of relax
Settle
into
in.
it. Yep.
And you
then
said the
we'll
leather
start forming
does tend to shrink a little bit when you put it in the one?
yeah, very, very minorly,
Yeah,
but yeah,
yeah.
you do expect, and also if you're dyeing things, you could often pays to dye it before you cut it because you may lose a little bit on shrinkage.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, Adam. So now we're going to start manipulating the leather into the form of the piece underneath.
Okay.
Basically, you just want to kind of scrunch it into the crevices and around the areas like the arm there. You're going to have to kind of like almost compress it in.
Right.
And you just want to start working it into the areas that are recessed. At the moment, it's still quite elastic, so it is a slight process where you just have to keep working your way around the piece, working it into all the areas, and as it slowly dries out, it will sort of retain more and more of the features of the former underneath.
And you let this sit in front of a fan to let it dry out a little bit.
That's
before
right.
It started.
Yep. Just had a little bit of a weight. It was slightly too wet. Again, like I say, with experience, you'll work out sort of when you can start working with it and when it's at its sort of optimum level of moisture.
And when you say too wet, do you mean that it'll just take too long for it to start to respond to the
Yeah,
forming?
it kind of it's too relaxed, and it will just kind of relax out of the shapes and not sort of hold its form.
So you'd be doing a lot of work for nothing.
That's right. Yeah, pretty much. Yep.
Okay. And it's you've got to get it to kind of shrink itself out here at the edges.
Yeah, you want to sort of just work it around all the edges and sort of around the neck there.
And if it moves off the form, it's still not that big a deal.
No, you can sort of pin it down once you get sort of a little bit of the detail in it. We could sort of pin it at the edges to stop it sort of wiggling around.
That's cool. It's very elastic.
Yeah, it's almost like modeling clay in a way when it's once you've sort of got the form in it, when it's still got some moisture in it, that's a good time to add any sort of, if you're doing embossing or any detailing work that requires texturing the leather, you could do that sort of whilst it's still moist from this process.
And that's what these are? These are embossing tools?
That's right, yep, they're basic stamping tools, readily available. Just with I'll actually show you later, Adam, with a few simple tools you can make some actually quite nice looking decorative sort of details to add the drama to your work.
I have always been fascinated by this, and I've never gone near this as a process.
Right, great.
I find it amazing that the Romans have been obsessing about six-packs for 2,000 years. It makes me feel a little better about our culture.
That's right. At least we can tell everyone we were working on our abs all afternoon.
Well done. See, the problem I had when I wet molded the feet of my Totoro custom was that I was using chrome tanned leather.
Yeah, for sure.
And I had to really crank it to get it to hold anything.
Yeah, it's great for covering things. You know, if you've got a surface and you just want to glue onto it, you can use chrome tan. They have beautiful colors and stuff. But yeah, just sort of limited in other ways.
I didn't realize that there was so much work to it.
Yeah, this is very thick leather.
Yeah.
And obviously if you're doing a little pouch, much more manageable than, or a sheath. You know, this is kind of the granddaddy of jobs, really.
Have you been taking advantage of the fact that the laser cutter cuts leather well?
We do, yes, and we also engrave acrylic blocks to use as stamps to emboss the
nice.
leather. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So what's the next step for this? Okay,
Adam, so we've got this at a pretty good stage now. We've just been working it as it's slowly been drying out. It's starting to retain the forms a lot better now. It's just a matter of time and sort of perseverance. You might be able to set that aside for 10 minutes, come back and just go over all the grooves and facets of everything. Just every now and then, as it slowly dries, it just sort of settles. So you just want to keep
making sure
topping it up. Yep. And then as it so happens, I've got one that I prepared earlier.
Excellent, it's a cooking show.
So we can now introduce this piece, which has been formed and has dried.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of semi-firm. It still has some flexibility. Mm-hmm. If you were using this as a costume piece, you might ultimately want to put a lining in it or something else, just at a second layer to sort of give it some rigidity.
Okay.
Or you could go into those processes we spoke about earlier of hardening the leather.
Or hardening. Okay.
Yeah. So the next stage from here is to basically trim off the excess.
Mm-hmm.
So on the inside surface, I've marked out the lines where we want it to finish, just onto a cutting surface. Mm-hmm. Just basically follow your lines.
And those slices you made, those were just to help the leather wrap around?
That was the most extreme curve that we were trying to create there. So just by slotting out that section, it makes it easier to wrap it around the corner. Very important to have a very sharp knife when cutting leather.
Yep.
If it's too blunt, you're sort of straining too much and sort of risk injuring yourself if it jumps on you. Yeah.
Yeah, this is the only time I'll ever have a 6-pack. 8-pack. Whatever pack.
So I think to finish off this piece, we kind of want to add some detail, some trim or something.
Okay.
So we will sort of put borders around all the edges, and we'll do a little bit of embossing on those.
Okay, there's also a little bit of rigidifying as well.
It does help, and it sort of thickens up the edges, which gives it that look of strength.
Right.
Sort of looks bulky at the edges and strong. So I think we need to make a pattern for these borders.
Okay.
If you're using very thin leather, you might be able to get away with just a straight strip and just manipulate it around as you glue it on.
But this is thicker.
Yeah, and we're going to use quite a thick, sort of 11-ounce leather.
Okay.
So we're going to have to make a pattern to make sure it fits.
How do we make that? How do you make the pattern for the
Okay, so we just want a basic little border around the edges. So a quick technique I use often is just to grab a piece of clear plastic, place it over the area you want to sort of make the pattern for. Going to mark the center and the shoulder. Doesn't have to be perfect. One of the best things about leather is it's quite forgiving, and you can sort of ease it in or stretch it out if you need be. And then just basically follow that line around. So we've got that shape. That's our center, that's our shoulder. And then we're just going to transfer that onto some paper. We're going to use a tracing wheel. That's our center. So we mark that. Just mark that.
And you only mark half of it because you'll
that's our
fold this.
Outer edge, yep. And that's the shoulder. And then we're just going to use a pattern maker's set square, and we're going to follow that line and just add a 20mm border around it. I think that's about 3/4 of an inch. But just by working your way around at a right angle to the point. These are sort of fashion pattern drafting techniques which come in handy with all sorts of construction.
Yeah.
And that's our center still. So then we can just cut that out. Great.
There's a pattern for a neck.
So that's our neck piece.
And then we cut that out of a
take that out
leather.
and cut it out of, we're going to use about 11 ounce. Not quite that thick, but quite thick as far as leather goes. Yep, 11 ounce leather. So I'll just grab some of that.
All right, here's one you prepared earlier.
Okay, yep.
Look at how thick that is. This is also veg tanned.
It is, yep. The color can vary due to the tanning process, or it is light sensitive, so it does sort of darken with exposure to sunlight. Still perfectly usable though. Now by just using a few simple tools, we're going to sort of turn this basic piece of leather into a decorative border for our armor, just to add some sort of detail and sort of finish to the piece. This is called an edge beveler, and this is called a stitch groover.
I have both of these tools, and I played a little bit with
great
both
tools,
of these.
And two of the very basics if you want to sort of start leatherworking. Probably a couple of the ones you want to get early on.
This does a groove at a set distance from the edge?
It does, yep. You can set it and it will either make a decorative border, or the actual function of one of these is to sort of countersink a line of stitching so it doesn't wear off.
So it's not above the leather.
Yeah, that's right. And
to protect it.
Prolong the life of the stitching. So basically just draw that along the edge of the leather.
Oh yeah. I couldn't believe
Making a
this
very
tool
basic
worked
border.
when I got it home. Can I do the other one?
Yep, I'm just going to
Oh,
go
you're
over
gonna
this
do a
one
second?
twice, just to
Ah.
make it, because it's very thick leather, just to give it that extra definition. Yep, there you go.
Awesome. It is. It's just a tiny little sharpened hole out at the end of this little L.
That's correct, yep.
There we go.
So you can see how you're starting to get some detail on that now. That by itself could be quite a basic border.
But it's not good enough for
That's
you.
right, we're going to keep going. We're going to use the edge beveler now,
Okay.
and just takes off that corner,
Oh.
rounding off the edge.
Yep.
Oops. Watch your fingers with that one.
Oh, it can give you a good gouge, I'll bet.
Yep.
All right. It is so cool how beautifully that makes a consistent bevel.
Leather is a fantastic product to work with. It's just got some amazing qualities.
Okay.
Great. Okay, now we're going to sort of put a little bit of a pattern on the inside of these lines now, using one of our embossing tools here. I think we're just going to use a little triangle tool and just do a basic repeat stamp.
Okay.
Now, before we do that, we're going to have to quickly immerse this in the
I
water.
was wondering if the leather had to be wet to receive
it's
that
just
stuff.
a bit easier to do some things when it's dry and others when it's wet. So I'll go
Okay.
and pop that in the water.
Okay. You like the briefest dip.
Yeah, that's right. So that was like, I counted to 4, I think, while it was in the water. Okay, so to start our pattern, I'm going to start in the middle and go out either way. So we just get our piece there, which we've cut slightly over length, and mark it in the middle. I'm going to grab a modeling tool, and I'm just going to open up that line again. As we dunked it in the water,
wow.
it sort of closed up a little, so we'll just sort of redefine that line.
And because it's wet, it can take this and it will
That's
hold
right.
on to this shape that you're giving it.
Now's a good time with the moisture in it too, Adam, to sort of slick down the edges or burnish the edges. This is just a simple bone folder.
Bone burnisher, right?
So you just work your way around the edge.
And just that little bit.
That's right, yep. You can kind of see it shine
Oh,
as,
yeah,
as
I
you
can.
you sort of go where you have been, haven't been. And then this top surface here is kind of the most important one because that's right on the very top surface.
And that'll hide a lot of crimes from your cutting or inconsistencies.
That's right,
too.
and you can smooth out little details and stuff, little sort of blemishes and that. So now we're just going to start in the center and basically just going to use the line as a guide and just start one at a time.
Oh, wow.
Just starting to make
Look
a
at
pattern.
I had no idea it made the pattern so fast.
So a simple triangle, and you're starting to make something quite decorative. Now ultimately I'll carry on round to the end and then come back the other way to sort of double up the pattern.
All right. I had no idea it took the texture so quickly.
It does depend on the piece of leather and the right amount of moisture.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Like if you had this too wet, this wouldn't necessarily work as well?
No, it would not be as clear and it would just sort of relax out,
Oh, wow.
leaving a very soft impression. And if it was too dry, it would just sort of bounce off the top.
Okay, so can I hazard a guess?
Okay, yep.
Is that
that's
about what you
right.
were doing?
Yep,
And then it's making a zigzag
that's correct, yep.
all the way down. And this is, I mean, you know, this isn't a super crazy involved job, but it gets there's a lot of bang for the buck here.
That's right, yep. Lovely.
It's terrific how that's making this wonderful
Yeah, a zigzag
lightning
pattern.
bolt all the way around.
Yep. And then we will sort of put that onto our piece.
Ah, look at that. That is very cool.
So again, using the powers of movie magic.
Here's one we prepared earlier. You want me to continue with the neck? Or do you have a neck?
No, you can carry on with that if you like.
Carry on with that. I also imagine you can clean up the edge by going back in with that tool you were using to clean up that
That's
line.
right, yep. You go back in the end and just sort of redefine all those lines. And so when we finish all these pieces, that gives you a sort of a glimpse as to how the finished piece will look, with just a little bit of added detail, sort of finishing off your costume.
Beautiful.
Just a few simple designs and elements put together. The next stage with a piece like this would be to colour the leather, which involves dyeing, either water-based or alcohol-based dyes. Personal preference. We actually use a combination of both here, depending on colours and sort of intensities that you want. So I could give you a few tips on dyeing
let's
leather.
do a tutorial on dyeing.
Sure.
Leather. Okay, I'm assuming the dye is a little smelly since we're standing in front of the vent hood.
That's right. The alcohol-based dyes can be a bit sort of smelly. The water-based one's not so bad. Obviously, you want to do the stuff outside if you can. We've got an extraction unit here which sucks away all the fumes, so we're good to go.
Okay.
Now, basically, we're going to use kind of a spritzing technique to lay down some sort of under elements to the color scheme, and then just put a sort of full base coat over it.
Okay.
So just using some different colors. We've got a bit of green dye here, a bit of sort of off black. Now just kind of spritzing just randomly, don't want to get too sort of carried away with it, but just little elements like this will show through at the end and sort of give you that sort of aged, sort of worn.
Oh, interesting.
Almost like possibly mildew or something from having leather. A lot of the work we do here, we want to make things look aged. We don't want them to look brand new off the factory floor. So adding all these little sort of features can do a lot for the overall effect.
And you don't just do it in one color either. You do it.
No, you know, just like trying to be natural, like trying to sort of imagine like the color of stone or you know, leather. I guess that's sort of been through, you know, all sorts of trials and tribulations. Move up to a brown.
And you're trying not to be too consistent about it.
And this is just going to be covered by the main color, so this will just be like a light feature that comes through at the end.
And you're letting this soak in a little bit?
Yep, it pretty much soaks in immediately. Some of the bigger drops might take a while, but now we're just going to sort of rag dye over the whole surface. Using a brush, you would probably use too much dye and saturate it, and the color would be too intense. So just to get a lighter layer, you can use a rag or like a piece of sheepskin or something.
And what kind of dye is this specifically for the veg tan?
Again, you can use either the water-based or the alcohol-based dyes. They both sort of work with the veg tan leather really well. And again, it's just personal preference.
Oh, and this is alcohol base?
This one is a water-based dye, yep.
Oh, okay.
Top coat, yep.
And I notice you're not being precious about the application.
No, again, you know, you don't want it to be too perfect and pristine. You want it to sort of look sort of just natural, really.
And I would also assume there are some dyes, like sometimes time is the deciding factor for what kind of dye you might use.
Yeah, you can always, with most processes working with leather, you can kind of speed them along with a hairdryer or a fan, just to sort of help those drying processes, just to speed things up. Now you can see some of the natural elements of the leather coming through now. These are sort of like stretch marks and some little scratches and stuff. So that's probably a good amount of dye for what we want for our purposes. We'll just set that aside to dry for a little second. And in the meantime, we can dye our border pieces.
Oh, okay.
And then for these pieces, we are going to use a brush. We want a sort of heavier concentration of dye. That will give it a sort of a nice sort of two-tone effect, a darker effect against the lighter body of the armor. So just brush nice thick coat to that.
And even with that heavy coat, this stuff will show through a little bit later?
Yeah.
Is it significant that the spritz is a alcohol dye and the coating is a water-based?
It can work to your advantage. It can give you, can sort of form little resists and just, it's just nice to sort of experiment with stuff and see what sort of reacts with other things, and you know, you have these happy accidents every now and then. Just trying to remember what you did, so you can do it again.
When you're drawing out and making the marks for doing leather detailing, like a bunch of tooling, do you have a preferred marking tool? Is it just a pencil?
Often I just use an awl.
Oh, okay.
Just not a particularly sharp one, just sort of a blunt line. And then you can mark it, and you can actually use a modeling tool or something else to sort of rub it out afterwards.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
In case it still shows up, right?
Yeah, in case you want to move your marks. Okay, so those are ready to go. What we could do now, when it's sort of got the moisture from the dye, you can add some of that texture, some of that rock texture, for instance, or sort of anything around the place. Could be a brick wall or something. Just,
oh, I see. Right,
just to add that sort of the aging detail into it. So again, we're going to use the same technique of spritzing a few colours, just little spots here and there.
It's a purple.
Yeah, it's a sort of a burgundy red. Yep.
Nice.
Bit of green in there. And then for these pieces, we are going to use a brush. We want a sort of heavier concentration of dye. That will give it a sort of a nice sort of two-tone effect, a darker effect against the lighter body of the armour. So just brush, nice thick coat.
And even with that heavy coat, this stuff will show through a little bit later?
Yeah.
Is it significant that the spritz is a alcohol dye and the coating is a water-based?
It can work to your advantage. It can give you, can sort of form little resists, and just it's just nice to sort of experiment with stuff and see what sort of reacts with other things, and you know, you have these happy accidents every now and then.
When you're drawing out and making the marks for doing leather detailing, like a bunch of tooling, do you have a preferred marking tool? Is it just a pencil?
Often I just use an awl.
Oh, okay.
Just not a particularly sharp one, just sort of a blunt line. And then you can mark it, and you can actually use a modeling tool or something else to sort of rub it out afterwards.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
In case it still shows up, right?
Yeah, in case you want to move your marks. Just adding a little bit of that sort of rock texture, sort of take away the sort of pristineness of it. Don't want to go too overboard and destroy all your pattern. People think, oh no, I don't want to, like, you know, destroy the pattern, but to me that's adding a whole other sort of level of sort of, you know, uniqueness and individuality to the piece as a whole, and gives it that believability that it's sort of not just been made, but it's actually been worn for decades.
Not just made in the world, but part of it.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah. Ah, that really looks beautiful.
But what we're going to do now is just sort of bring out all the natural marks and stuff and all the detail that's in there by sanding it with very fine sandpaper. Like it's not super fine, it's about 400, 320. I think a mistake people make is too rough a grit sandpaper, and you go big, and then you can't get rid of it. It kind of looks like someone's just, you know, scuffed it with sandpaper. So we want to try and just go in very lightly. It picks out all the highlights.
And the texture that you were working so hard to put back in is really helping here. Wow.
And also those little spots of dye that were in underneath start to come through. And once we put a final polish over it, that will sort of pick it out even more.
Really deepen it and give it a little extra layer.
Yeah, give it a little bit of a luster. Don't want it too shiny, you don't want a high gloss finish on it. For most pieces, you just want a sort of subtle satin finish.
The weathering is my favorite part.
Yeah.
Of every project.
Absolutely. And you could go overboard and put some weapon marks and stuff on it, depending on the degree of breakdown you want.
Sure.
Totally up to personal preference.
And this is all for the character in our film who's going to die almost immediately after we see him.
Yeah.
So he doesn't get a lot of chance to shine. His costume has to tell a story.
Absolutely. he's been through the ringer, you can tell.
Exactly. So this is a wax.
It's called an antique finish. It's not particularly a sealer or a waterproofer.
Okay.
It's a coloured sort of wax that will just sort of pick out and sort of highlight the tones that we already have in here. And pretty much we just use it as a decorative finish rather than a sort of, like I say, waterproof or anything.
So it's not a, oh wow,
So we're just going to brush it on.
Oh, you are playing a totally interesting game here.
And then wipe it off.
Oh, there's just no contest.
And so now you can see
Now
those
it
little
feels like it's
spots.
been- yeah.
You can see the natural texture of the leather, and it all comes out
Okay, yeah. And they make
looking fantastic.
this in different colors and clears and
That's
other
right,
stuff
yep,
like that.
yep.
Okay.
This is kind of the true reveal of the sort of work you've been putting in at the earlier stages.
Right. Does it start showing up through here?
Right back
Have
to
you
when we
sanded
were.
enough? And I suppose if you didn't like it, you could sand more and apply more.
That's
and
right,
keep
yep,
sanding more
yep.
and really work it.
Yep.
Some of my best weathering comes when I've screwed up something completely and I try and strip it down and start from scratch.
Absolutely, yep. Those happy mistakes.
That is really cool. And now the under texture here is very subtle, but it tells it's
Yeah, so
much
there you
more-
can see the sort of the difference in look before
that
and
is
after.
freaking cool. All right. I have to go. I'm going to leave you with this.
Great.
And I'll see you when we progress further. Thank
Yes,
you very
absolutely.
much. Sir.
You're most welcome.
Is the mixture of this at all adjustable by the heat?
Yeah, the heat like just today is going to kick it off, and it goes really fast normally.
Like most urethane foams, this one kicks pretty quick.
Yep, this one is very fast. It takes a while to cure, but it foams up super fast.
Boom.
Close enough, he says. And just put a bit of colour in it.
I'm surprised how little color it needs. That was just like
10 drops I put in there, so it's pretty.
yeah.
And of course, it changes colour as soon as you mix it up and it foams. It changes colour as well. So it goes in one colour and.
wow. Oh, it looks very fleshy.
We're literally just.
I'm going to hold it up.
Yeah, it'd be good actually. Just, yeah.
Oh, you're going to actually slush it.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
slush it around because it is a self-skinning foam, but it doesn't generate a very good skin a lot of the time. You can see that it's already starting to activate. Oh yeah. And it's coming up quite aggressively. Mm-hmm. You can see in there.
Yeah, that heat, right?
Yep.
Wow, that was very quick.
Yeah, it's very. I mean, obviously the mold's warm, so it's a compromise between trying to get a good skin.
So you're going to still try and dump it out, or no?
Nope.
It's just what it is.
It's definitely a test cast now. But what we'll do is we'll just see what we get out of that.
All right.
And that'll help us. You know, we need about this much of the arm.
Right.
From about there down. And this section up here I'll use to make some kind of rig.
Okay.
Whether it's fiberglass or some of the heat set plastic, just to create something that we can put onto you to mount the arm off.
That was a long day.
Yes, productive, but we're getting a lot done.
Well, we have a lot to get done. It's very lucky for us that Weta behind us is a machine built to get exactly this thing done. This is what they do all day long.
You know, something I'm learning is that as much as we can plan for day-to-day, things don't always go right.
Never.
Now, we started off today with things going pretty right, with the face of the creature being pulled.
Pulled out perfectly. We got a perfect casting.
And Jason, clearly a lot of experience with that, but that still needs to be painted.
And even though it's January here right now, we're in the middle of, well, it's January here right now, which means we're in the middle of Wellington summer, and it's pretty hot, and that led to the arm cast not casting perfectly. The foam urethane kicked really quickly. The fingers didn't really set. There were lots of bubbles all over it, and so Jason's going to wait until it's cooler and pour another one tonight.
How did you feel about the pose of the arm and how your armor is going to fit around that as a thing to be pulled off?
Perfectly. It's awesome. They're going to be able to shave it off and put it on the front of my arm, so my arm is here. We've separated out the rivets on my armor so that it's wrappable and we can make it look just like normal, but then we can pull off the lower half of the armor. It's technically and mechanically, everything's going really smoothly. Just a couple of hiccups.
Yeah, and I'm so curious what his solution is going to be for the detaching of the arm, right?
Indeed.
the arm isn't, the prosthetic, your arm may be tied behind its back, but they still have to attach it with a way, so maybe magnets.
Well, this also may be, well, I'm not sure we're necessarily going to get the full-on, the arm gets torn off in a single shot. There's going to be some cheating there.
Yeah.
And this is what we're going to have to arrange with Joey behind the camera and our stunt performers to help us understand exactly how to get this kind of effect to work for the camera.
Right, right. And so while you were also working on some of that casting, we also had some production meetings. We're having some location discussions. So we're locking down our location. Tomorrow, we don't know right now, but tomorrow hopefully we'll see some locations and give you some options for what you had in mind for the script.
Awesome.
Yes, it's all coming together very fast. And then I thought you had a lot of fun with that wet molding leather.
I did.
Darren works so fast.
He does.
The way he took that, traced that outline for using the clear sheet, and use that tool to create the
pounce wheel.
Yes, yeah.
It was really cool and instructive, and actually one of the things I'm most excited about doing, because that was the last thing we did today, is get back to the hotel room and make notes about what he taught me, so I can go back to San Francisco and start playing around with patterning and molding leather.
Right, because the look of that type of armor.
Totally addictive. I mean, not necessarily that I want a bunch of Roman musculature armor, but I want to be playing with the leather. I do a lot of different work with it, but I've never done that kind of stuff. It's just really exciting.
And some of the stuff that we've done the past couple of days now is going to come together tomorrow in the form of the blood ring.
Yes.
That's another big question mark for us.
I haven't seen anything to do with this, so I'm psyched to see where they're going with it.
So many departments. We're going to see another new one tomorrow.
Okay.
All right.
Let's go home and get some sleep.
And we'll see you then.